Lindisfarne 793, the Viking raid that changed England forever. What happens when peace meets a longship? When prayers are drowned out by war cries? When a holy island becomes a hunting ground for heathens? On June 8, 793 AD, Lindisfarne, England's spiritual sanctuary, was shattered. But how did a few dozen Viking raiders unleash a terror so profound it echoed across Europe? Why this island? What did they want? And could a haircut really have stopped them? This isn't just a raid, it's the birth of the Viking Age. A story of gold, blood, divine blame, and monks on the run. And trust me, you've never seen history told like this. Lindisfarne was the kind of place where even the sheep whispered. Nestled off the coast of Northumbria, it was a holy island, a spiritual retreat, and a medieval version of Do Not Disturb. Monks wandered barefoot, scribbling Latin verses, brewing ale, and occasionally arguing over who got the last turnip. It was peaceful. Too peaceful. But peace, as history loves to remind us, is just the silence before the scream. The year 793 began with a cosmic tantrum. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, basically the medieval version of Twitter, recorded whirlwinds, lightning and fiery dragons flying through the sky. Monks saw visions. Storms battered the coast. Brother Ethelred, the monastery's resident drama queen, declared, "The end is nigh." He also said that last week when the cheese went moldy, but this time he wasn't wrong. The omens were stacking up like bad Yelp reviews from the gods. A famine had just swept through the land. People were terrified. And then, the sea broke open. On the morning of June 8, 793, the monks of Lindisfarne looked out to sea and saw something strange. Dark shapes, sleek, fast, silent. Viking longships, their dragon-headed prows slicing through the mist like knives through butter. The monks squinted. "Pilgrims?" one asked hopefully. "Definitely not," muttered Brother Ethelred, clutching his copy of the Gospels like a teddy bear. The ships ran aground. Warriors poured out, tall, bearded, and very much not interested in converting. They were here for plunder, glory, and possibly a good laugh at how easy this was. The Vikings hit Lindisfarne like a thunderclap. Monks scattered like chickens. Sacred relics were snatched. Altars overturned. The tomb of St. Cuthbert, one of England's most revered saints, was desecrated. Brother Ethelred tried to hide behind a barrel of communion wine. It didn't work, but the Vikings were too busy looting to notice one terrified monk whispering prayers and regretting every life choice. The priory burned. Blood stained the holy ground, and Lindisfarne, once a beacon of peace, became a graveyard of faith. This wasn't the first Viking visit. In 789, 3 ships had landed in Wessex and killed a local official. But Lindisfarne was different. It was sacred, symbolic, a soft target that sent a loud message. The Viking Age had begun. Later legends would credit Ragnar Lothbrok, the Norse rock star, with leading the raid. TV shows dramatized it, historians debated it, but contemporary sources are silent on the raiders' names. What they do record is the shockwave that tore through Christian Europe. This wasn't just a raid, it was a declaration. The Northmen were coming, and they weren't knocking Lindisfarne 793 AD. A place so tranquil, even the sheep whispered their prayers. There was no Lindisfarne castle back then. That came centuries later to keep out the Scots. In 793, the monks had no walls, no guards, and no clue. Their defense strategy? Faith, sandals, and a stern look. They were scribes, not soldiers. Their weapons were quills. Their treasures? Gold-encrusted chalices, silver crosses, and books so sacred they made grown men weep. But on June 8th, the weeping would turn to screaming. The year had started with a cosmic horror show. Lightning, whirlwinds, fiery dragons flying through the sky. Or possibly very angry birds. Medieval optics weren't great. Brother Ethelred, the monastery's resident panic merchant, declared, "The heavens are angry." His fellow monks rolled their eyes. "You said that last week when the bread went stale." But this time, Ethelred was right. The omens were real. And they weren't just angry. They were armed. On the morning of June 8th, the horizon cracked open. Dark shapes emerged, sleek, fast, and terrifying. Viking longships, dragon-headed, wave-slicing beasts. The monks squinted. "Pilgrims?" one asked, hopefully. "Definitely not," muttered Ethelred, clutching his psalms like a shield. The ships ran aground. Out poured a few dozen warriors. Not an army, but a raiding party. Think Ocean's 11, but with axes and zero charm. They weren't here for land. They were here for loot. And Lindisfarne was a jackpot. The Vikings burst into the wooden priory like a thunderclap. They went room to room, robbing, smashing, stabbing. The monks tried to hide their books, beautiful hand-inked masterpieces. But the Vikings didn't care about literature. They wanted gold, silver, and slaves. They stripped altars bare. Jewel-encrusted cups, gone. Sacred crosses, gone. Monks chained and salted or drowned. One medieval source lamented, they trampled the holy places with polluted steps, dug up the altars, and seized all the treasures of the Holy Church. Brother Ethelred tried hiding behind a barrel of communion wine. It didn't work, but the Vikings were too busy looting to notice one terrified monk whispering prayers and regretting every life choice. The Church of St. Cuthbert, once a beacon of holiness, was now a blood-soaked ruin. Alcuin of York wrote, "The Church of St. Cuthbert is spattered with the blood of the priests of God, stripped of all its treasures and left unprotected from these plundering pagans." Some monks were dragged to the shore, clapped in chains. Others were stripped naked and thrown out like garbage. Some were drowned in the sea. And here's the twist. Slavery wasn't just a Viking thing. Anglo-Saxon England did it too. But for monks used to quiet prayers and gentle sheep, being hauled off to a heathen land was a nightmare beyond imagination. The news spread like wildfire. God's house had been ransacked, God's men murdered, God's treasures stolen. England was in shock, Europe trembled. And suddenly everyone realized faith alone wouldn't stop an axe. So what did they do? They built walls, fortified monasteries, trained guards, and started praying with one eye open. The monks of Lindisfarne had just survived the medieval equivalent of a horror movie. Gold stolen, altars desecrated, priests slaughtered, survivors chained or drowned. And the sacred bones of St. Cuthbert? Dug up and carried like a holy suitcase. England was stunned. The holiest place in the land had been turned into a Viking buffet, and the question on everyone's lips was, why? Alcuin, a respected scholar and theologian, sat down with his quill and a strong sense of judgment. He didn't blame the Vikings. Oh no, he blamed the monks. In a letter dripping with divine shade, Alcuin wrote that the attack was God's punishment. Why? Because the monks had apparently been living like medieval Kardashians, too much luxury, too little humility. Consider the dress, the way of wearing the hair, the luxurious habits of the princes and people. Translation, cut your hair, wear less bling, and maybe God won't send axe-wielding pagans next time. Yes, really. Alcuin believed that bad hairstyles had angered God. Imagine the monks, fresh from trauma, being told, "Brothers, the Vikings came because your bangs were too bold." It was spiritual victim-blaming at its finest. And while Alcuin's advice sounds bonkers today, it reflected a real medieval belief that sin invited suffering and piety repelled punishment. Despite the monks' best efforts to live humbly and trim their locks, the Vikings weren't done. In fact, they were just warming up. Throughout the 9th century, raids increased in scale and frequency. Until in 865, the great heathen army arrived. Less smash and grab, more were moving in. This wasn't just raiding, it was conquest. For decades, England tried to pray the Vikings away. Spoiler, it didn't work. Eventually, Alfred the Great realized that while God was great, military strategy and diplomacy were also pretty useful. He fortified towns, built a navy, negotiated treaties, and proved that Vikings could be pushed back, not with sermons, but with swords. Meanwhile, the surviving monks of Lindisfarne packed up their most sacred relic, St. Cuthbert's coffin, and hit the road. They wandered for years, seeking safety, carrying their saint like a spiritual passport. Eventually they settled in Durham, but Lindisfarne wasn't forgotten. In the 12th century, the monks returned. They built a new priory, stone, fortified, and ready. But the memory of 793 lingered like a scar. The raid on Lindisfarne became the template of terror. It haunted England for generations. It reshaped faith, politics, and defense, and it taught a brutal lesson. Even the holiest places can bleed. Alcuin's theory of divine punishment would persist, but history would show that haircuts don't stop Vikings. Walls, warriors, and wisdom do. Lindisfarne was the beginning. The Vikings were coming. And England would never be the same. If this story gripped you, shocked you, or made you rethink medieval haircuts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and click the bell so you never miss another epic tale from the shadows of history. We've got more blood, betrayal, and brilliance coming your way.